There is no such thing as free speech in the Middle East. We've seen people go to jail, we've seen people disappeared, tortured even, their families threatened. And in other cases, we've seen them prosecuted to the full extent of the law, which in the UAE, for an Instagram post such as Sheikha Zaynab's, could result in a life in prison. Now, what leads to change is when a want becomes a must. A need, a thought becomes a must. It is simply a must. We cannot have it like this anymore. We can't have the oppression of free speech. We can't have the oppression of women's rights. When that becomes a must, and for enough people, that push is going to lead to change. And that's what started in the Middle East. We've had Sheikha Latifa. Her freedom was a must for her. At any cost, she decided to flee the UAE. Again, with Sheikha Zaynab, it was a must that she's not separated from her children, and she live streamed that must, even though she put her own life at risk and could have ended up in prison for the rest of her life. Ahmed Mansour, now I spoke to him before his disappearance, his repeated disappearance. He is jailed regularly for his views on democracy in the UAE. But when I spoke to him, he said it's a must that this changes in the UAE, and even if that means I could end up in prison, I could end up in solitary confinement and tortured. This is the same attitude that Sheikha Latifa had. Now, when it comes to free speech, women's rights, the right to oppose the government or the right to talk about things going on in the country, when that becomes a must, and for enough people it becomes a must, then real change happens. And this is what we see in Australia as well, with the oppression of free speech in Melbourne, with people being arrested for organising protest. If we allow that, then it's possible. But if we say no, it's a must that we have the ability to protest. It's a must that we have free speech and the right to gather and the right to talk about oppression. When that's a must, it can't happen anymore. So it comes down to our decision. Is this okay? Is this behaviour okay? Is it okay that social media companies are deciding what we should believe on the internet and censoring voices? And is it right that women are being oppressed in the UAE, in Qatar, in Saudi, and being deprived of their children? Is it okay that these countries are actually threatening people outside of their own borders, even with kidnapping, abduction, death threats in the United States? Is it right that these countries have access to the Interpol database to abuse our citizens? Well, it must be if it's